I lied. I said we weren't doing a YouTube segment today, but we actually are. Thank you to the person who sent me that information. So we're having this discussion today about the way in which New York City politics is really providing a very dynamic lesson for those who are a part of the Black community who want to think about how they show up in elected spaces. And as I was just telling the Urban View audience, from the years 1619 until 1964, Black people could be killed for trying to have a conversation about electoral politics. We could be killed for having a conversation about what leadership in this country looks like. And if you think I'm exaggerating, I run a law center that is based in at a college that is named after Medgar Wiley Evers, who, as you all know, or you should know, was assassinated in his driveway for the crime of trying to register Black people to vote. Now, this was a man who had served his country. He was just a phenomenal figure in the community. And he was assassinated in his driveway because he was attempting to ensure that Black people had the right to vote. And so while we, from 1619 until 1964, and by my lawyer math, and I remind people I went to law school partly because I was not very good at math and science, even though I wanted to be a doctor. I wish I'd had Doc McStuffins when I was little. But when we think about from 1619 until 1964, that's roughly 345 years by my math. And what that means is for 345 years, Black people trying to have a conversation about what elected leadership looks like, trying to have a conversation about how to build a bench of political power, trying to have a conversation about what policies should be implemented in the country. Black people having those conversations would die, could face death. And when we talk about the policing and the patrolling systems that really shaped this country's policing systems, one of the things that early patrollers would search for wasn't just people who were running away. It was they would run through the woods, these slave patrollers, these paddy rollers. They would also run through the woods in an effort to find Black people who were meeting, who were having private meetings and discussions, who were having conversations about how they could make their world a better place. They were having conversations about what they could do in order to improve their condition as Black people who were living with either enslavement or free Black people who were in collaboration with people who were dealing with enslavement. And so the slave patrollers weren't just going to chase Black people who were running away from enslavement. The slave patrollers were also doing everything that they could to stop Black political discourse. They were doing everything that they could to prevent Black people from being able to have engagement in a way that would allow for any sort of Kuji-Chagalia approach to living. There was going to be no self-determining. And if you tried that, again, you could die, right? So when we think about union busting meetings, and for any of you who saw that film, it was called The Great Debaters. In the opening scene of The Great Debaters, Denzel Washington is a professor at Wiley College. Shout out to Wiley College in Texas, a phenomenal HBCU in existence to this day, doing amazing work. And he, as a professor, was in a meeting with a bunch of sharecroppers, and not just Black sharecroppers, but white sharecroppers and white poor farmers and Black poor farmers. And they were having an organizing meeting there. And what you see in one of those opening scenes is that this organizing meeting is busted up by the Klan. Now, it's not that the Klan was coming to bust up this meeting because they were trying to get all the Black people. The Klan was in this moment using their violence and their racist terrorism to break up the collaborations, the political organizing and collaborations that Black people were engaging in, along with poor white people, with organizers and professors. So this was a time where you had, again, a Black professor played by Denzel Washington directly connecting and using his power to address the conditions and the needs of poor Black people. So you see a real approach to dealing with classism, a real approach to dealing with all of the ways in which our society seeks to divide us in just that one scene. And I mention that because the way that meeting was broken up by those Klans members, by those racist terrorists, was very similar and reminiscent as to the way in which policing was used in this society to stop Black people, not just from running away, but to stop Black people from having spaces where we could have conversation about what civic engagement, and it wasn't even civic engagement, it was freedom engagement, right? But what freedom could look like, that was something that they did not want to have happen. And so the ability to have the language about how to discuss these topics, the ability to understand how these systems work, was not something that we had access to. Now, what's important about that to remember is that at the very same time, our white counterparts, they were not sneaking out into the wood, because when we did have these conversations, it was literally a function of sneaking out into the woods and trying to be very quiet and have conversations in the dark so nobody would see you, doing what you could, losing the trail, trying to throw off the scent of the dogs who you knew would be chasing you. And these were the ways and the conditions under which we had to have these discussions. And at the same time, our white counterparts were able to sit in rooms where they had open meetings and they had well-lit rooms and often catered, and the food would be served to them by enslaved Africans. And these were white people who were basically trying to figure out, like, how do you build a democratic system while also preserving slavery? And these were white meetings where basically people were able to have discussions about not just what does it mean to have a candidate, what does it mean to hold a candidate accountable? What does it mean to have a bench of candidates? What does it mean to be able to raise money and to raise money for a campaign and and to move money from one bucket to another bucket. These were conversations that white people could have openly and robustly and engage in dynamic discourse while we had to sneak out into the woods to figure out how to get our kids for freedom. And so when that's the reality that we're facing politically, it makes sense that for us as Black people, and I have to start here because I never want to have a conversation about Black elected officials without this foundation. For us as Black people, the reason this matters is because that means from 1619 to 1964, when they signed the Civil Rights Act into law, which was not the first Civil Rights Act. We technically had a Civil Rights Act right after the Civil War, but we're going to talk about that another day because white Americans have traditionally been able to wash, rinse, and repeat not only oppression, but faux allegiances to some sort of freedom for Black people and then take it all back. And we're seeing that happening in real time. Let's leave that to the side for now. But that, again, becomes 345 years of a gap. Not just of a gap in knowledge, but a gap of experiential engagement with a system that our white colleagues were engaged with at the highest heights of thought and intellectual capacity and discourse and debate. They were literally building the plane while they flew it. So they don't just know the rules. They know how to break the rules. They know where the weak points are because these are rules that are a function of the system that they created for themselves. And so when we come to a political system, we are not the same. We are not coming at it with the same level of knowledge, with the same level of experiential background. We are not coming to this system with much more than hopes and dreams for how to register to vote. And when registering to vote is the highest thing that we can consider, and then getting voter turnout, when those are the areas where our legacy organizations, where our civil rights organizations tend to be focused, again, because it's a 345-year gap. So it's not our fault that we have low levels of civic sophistication when it comes to understanding this system. It is not our fault that we sometimes have some real challenges thinking about how we take concepts like skin folk ain't kinfolk, not all skin folk are kinfolk, and infuse them into the political space in a way that will allow us to elect black officials who are going to represent us, or elect any officials who are going to represent us. But in this conversation, we're going to talk specifically about Black elected officials. And it also doesn't allow for us to have a full and robust understanding as to how we take that concept that all skin folk ain't kinfolk and use it electorally in a way that is going to advance us as a people if us as a people have a set of needs that are in contravention to what this individual candidate has. Let me slow down a little bit because I want to explain this part very, very carefully. We often will approach getting a candidate into office with concepts that sound like, well, that's my pastor. And I love my pastor, and I'm going to vote for my pastor. Or I went to church with that candidate, and I know him when he was in Sunday school, or I knew her when she was on the missionary board, and we had a wonderful time together. She was a wonderful candidate back then, and I think she was a wonderful person back then. I think she'll be a great person in this particular elected office. And we often will approach candidacies of Black people from a very personal perspective. And this is not to say that we should be ashamed of that. It is to say that we are also a very communal people. So it makes sense that we would have this sort of engagement and this sort of approach to the idea as to who it is that we want to put in office to represent us. And we saw a lot of this, no shade, during the Barack Obama years. Oh, I just realized I have a tripod here. Let me see if I can raise this camera so I'm not looking down at Joe. Oh my God, look at that. Whole situation just changed. We saw a lot of this when it came to President Barack Obama. And when President Barack Obama was in office, there were wonderful things that he accomplished. And then there were some things that he accomplished were not so great that we should have been able to have robust discussion and discourse about. One I can think of is the response to the foreclosure crisis. It was trash. And I know this because at the time of the foreclosure crisis, I was an attorney trying to keep Black people in their homes. Did a good job on most of them, but really struggled with the law. And the solutions that the Democrats put out at that time were trash-ass solutions. They were solutions that were going to benefit banks. And were not going to benefit the homeowners, and it did not allow for us to use some of the tools that would have been available to us had we had more leadership in that area. We should have been able to have a robust conversation about that, but anytime somebody wanted to criticize President Barack Obama, it was challenging. Ask me how I know. It was very challenging to have conversations where we were criticizing him because there was a sense of protection. There was a recognition that this man and his beautiful wife and those beautiful girls, and we wanted to protect and we wanted to ensure that, because we knew he was going to also be held to a standard that other people were not. We knew he was going to also be criticized in ways that other people were not. So it makes sense that we want to have a protective energy around him. But your job is to be critiqued when you are an elected official. Our job as constituents is to hire candidates with our votes or fire them with our votes and then hold them accountable for doing the job. The job of an elected official is to distribute resources because politics is just the science of distributing resources. And so when you are distributing resources, the resources could be water, good or bad, clean or dirty, schools, good or bad, hospitals, good or bad, well-funded or not, transportation, well-funded or not. The resources that we need that government provides for us, they are supposed to be distributed by politicians. And so if you are an elected official and we hire you with our vote, your job as an elected official is to distribute those resources. If you distribute resources in a way that is inequitable, if you distribute resources in a way that centers white people or that does not allow us as Black people to get the benefits for why we voted for you in the first place, you don't get to just keep that job, sir. You don't get to just keep that job, ma'am. You don't get to just sit in that space. You have to then be held accountable because if I get hired at a job, YouTube, I forgot to put evaluation system that is going to say you are either good at your job as an elected official, so that's why you deserve our vote again, or you're bad at your job as an elected official. We're not going to vote for you again. Either way, our love for you as a Black elected official, we got love for you. But if you bad at your job, Pookie, you got to go. Ray, you can't sit there no more. Keisha, you can't be there no more if you're not good at your job. And it's love. We respect you. We appreciate you. We will see you at church on Sunday. We will break bread with you at the cookout. We gonna put boots on the ground with you when we dance in the line dance. But you just can't be in that job anymore because you're probably better suited for something else because we the people have needs and our needs as a collective should trump your need to have a job at our expense. What does New York City's electoral decision or politics have to say about this and have to do with this? We are in a situation in New York City in the mayoral election, and you've heard me talk about this a lot, but it keeps coming up because this is a conversation that we absolutely must continue to have. And in New York City, we have a mayor, Mayor Eric Adams, who is a Black man who has, in the course of his career, done some really good things, done some really powerful things. And yet, as mayor, he has demonstrated he has lived the experience, and he has demonstrated for us a real life experience of whether or not the all skin folk and kinfolk conversation should show up in this space. So under New York City's mayor, we have had budgets for our schools cut. We have had budgets for our after school programs cut. We had budgets for our healthcare systems cut. We had budgets for our transportation systems cut. We had budgets for our libraries cut. We had budgets for summer youth employment cut. We had budgets for nonprofit organizations cut. Under this mayor, it has taken longer for nonprofit organizations to get paid for the services that they provide than I think under any other mayor previously, which means that the often Black-led organizations that are doing the work of filling in the gaps that were left because this mayor's bad policies existed, we are now not able to get the resources that we need in order to do that work, but we're still expected to do the work. The mayor is a Black man. He's I'm sure, loved by his close community. I have worked with him in previous instances where it has been effective when he was the president of the borough of Brooklyn. But we are in a situation where, as mayor, the Black community has suffered. This is a mayor who is also a former NYPD police officer. And this is not personal. I know a lot of you have a personal connection to him, and you should continue to nurture those personal connections. This is about the people. It's about the needs of the people. And so when he came into office, he was also a former NYPD officer, and he brought back and resurged some of the most devastatingly violent anti-Black policing units that had been disbanded under the previous white mayor. He brought back a stop, question, and frisk protocol that essentially is responsible for terrorizing millions of New Yorkers that was also considered unconstitutional and had been disbanded, or I'm sorry, not fully disbanded. The numbers had been brought down for over 500,000 New Yorkers a year, way down, under 50,000 New Yorkers a year. Still problematic because the racial disparities still existed, but they did significant improvements under this previous white mayor that we had. And then under our Black mayor, those numbers have gone up. Do with that information what you will. And you can love who you love. You can appreciate who you can appreciate. But we, the people, have to fill in this 345-year gap with some substantive knowledge. Because if our current mayor had been a white man, our community would have been out in the streets protesting in ways that we usually do when this is happening under previous white mayors. That did not happen this time. That did not happen under Mayor Eric. There was protests, yes, but not nearly to the level that they would have been had, say, these things happened under a Giuliani or a Bill de Blasio or a Michael Bloomberg, 3 previous white mayors. And so why that matters is because, again, recognizing that we were very harmed and have been very harmed as Black New Yorkers, as New Yorkers generally, very harmed under this mayor. It has been very difficult for people to speak openly about this and to have vibrant discourse about what we should do with this information and this reality because of a desire to protect. We got to fix that. And the lesson that this provides for all, and I had started out by saying that this was going to be a lesson for other Black elected officials. And I realize that's not actually correct. This is a lesson for Black communities, for Black voters. Because when you are considering who to vote for, the questions that we have to ask ourselves are the following. Number one, when you are in the voting booth, which of these candidates and their policies will either, number one, help my community the most in the most optimistic of options, or number two, hurt my community the least? Sometimes the best answer to that question is going to be a Black elected official. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just not. And we have to be able to say, listen, Pooh, we love you, bruh. We love you, sis. I'm going to see you at the cookout. I got that. I'm going to bake you a sweet potato pie because I know your mama still likes a sweet potato pie, but you sucked at this job. Our people suffered under you in this job. And as a result of it, we're going to fire you from this job with our votes, and we're going to hire somebody else. No, it's no shade. We love you. We respect you. We think you're a human being at heart. You were just bad at distributing resources in a way that was going to benefit us. And for this job, the only question we have is, are you going to be able to distribute those resources in a way that benefits us? The lesson that New York City provides for all of us, because we also had a situation in New York City and here's the part, I guess, where Black elected officials can learn a little thing, where Black elected officials, as this mayoral campaign was going, this primary was going, the current mayor did not run as a Democrat. So the man I'm talking about, though he came into office as a Democrat, the man I'm talking about ran as an independent. So he was not a part of the Democratic primary. And the man that I'm talking about, he is running as an independent, Eric Adams, the person who lost the primary, who everybody thought was going to, who the Black political establishment thought was going to win the primary, Andrew Cuomo, our former governor, lost and lost bigly, hugely. The man lost and lost real good. And this matters because many members of the Black political class came out in this primary so early for Andrew Cuomo. They threw all their support behind Andrew Cuomo. They had spouses and family members on Andrew Cuomo's payroll within like 24 hours of that man announcing that he was formally running. And when they did that, and this is where the lesson for Black elected officials comes in, what they did was essentially make themselves, to quote Evelyn Lozada, I think that's her name from Basketball Wives. I mess her name up every single time. I think that's her name. What they essentially did, yes, it was, okay, I'm confirmed that is her name. They made themselves non-motherfucking factors in the primary. And they were so quick to glom on to who they thought was going to win that they did so without a critical evaluation as to those policies. Because when Governor Cuomo was in office, we lost a whole ass congressional seat because he sat on $20 million of census funds that were supposed to be distributed to organizations. And I say this example every single time because they asked me to introduce him when he announced this $20 million pot. And I stood on a stage and introduced Andrew Cuomo and this $20 million pot of money that was supposed to go to organizations to make the word clear so that we could do census organizing and outreach. And so when you tell me to be a part of something and then you lie, we got a problem, and I'm going to talk about it. So that's one of the reasons why I always raise that example, because he sat on that money and sat on it so long that we ended up losing a congressional seat because 89 more census forms didn't get filled out. 89 census forms could have been way filled out. We could have gained a congressional seat had that money been distributed equitably. We sat in a moment when Andrew Cuomo was in leadership where he basically was able to take a group of 6 or 7 independent Democrats, that's what they call themselves, and caucus with the Republicans. So even though the Democrats in New York State had a majority, had almost a super majority, they were never able to effectuate any of the goals that the Democratic candidates had promised their constituents because Andrew Cuomo was able to, with this group of independent Democrats, caucus with Republicans and basically rule as a Republican while bearing the label of a Democrat. And so the lesson that this gives to Black elected officials who are now kerfluffed. Now there's a whole lot of people in New York City who are very troubled about how it is they're going to move forward, because what also happened during this primary was for the first time had Black older people come out to vote, and they voted for Andrew Cuomo largely. They followed what their elected officials told them to do and largely voted for him. Young Black voters, however, went with Zohran Mamdani, a young man who is, he's born in Uganda. He's of Indian descent, born in Uganda, and like an Africana studies major. Like, he's got some real vibrant and exciting ideas that frankly were very exciting to a lot of people. And Black young people, for the first time in ways that were amazing to see, came out to vote in such numbers that it demonstrated an electoral split ideologically. And so we are now in a moment where I am thrilled because this is forcing us to really grapple with the difficulties and the tensions that exist within our community about which direction we should go in. Often those tensions exist, but they're not reflected in the electoral turnout. This time they were. And Zohran Mamdani didn't just win young Black people. He won everybody else. demonstrating that you are capable of winning an election now in New York City without the strength of the majority of the Black vote, which is not something that would have had to be explored, except for the fact that when people were in office, they did not also employ policies that were going to allow Black New Yorkers to still be able to afford to live here, though we told them that they should. So over the course of the past 20 years, over 200,000 Black New Yorkers have had to leave New York City. They might have voted for these they might have voted in the way that the Black elected class wanted them to vote, and we don't know. They're not here anymore because nobody saved them. Nobody came in to use the policies to distribute resources in a way that would keep them here. So the lessons that New York City provides are so manifold, and I know that troubles people, and I know there's a lot of consternation and frustration. I would just encourage us all, New Yorkers and everyone who's watching this, I would really encourage us to go into some quiet spaces, look at the policies that are being promised and promulgated, and think about the practical impact of leadership on your lived experience and in your daily life. And then have conversations privately if you need, because I know it's still, there's tension around having these discussions publicly. We don't want to ever put our electeds in or our people from our community in a position where they're going to be held up to vitriol. But we really have to get much better at remembering how to do the work of engaging civically, a system that we were excluded from for 345 years. We're going to have to figure out how to do that work while reminding ourselves that the only reason we have elections is to hire and fire people who are going to be responsible for distributing resources. And if those people who are distributing the resources either don't like you or like their funders more than they like you, they got to go. And as Black people, we need to give ourselves permission to say, we love you, sis. We love you, bruh. But you suck at this job. You might be better in engineering. You might be better at maybe going back to law school. Maybe you should consider joining the transportation unit. I don't know, but this job, you tried it. You did not do it what needed to be done. And as a result, we have to move you from this position, because the reality is we sometimes treat our elected officials the way we treat our pastors. We sometimes treat our elected officials, we deify our pastors, which I think is a sin, but we deify pastors and we elevate them to such a degree that they are above reproach. No man, woman, person, human being is above reproach. Not me, not you, not nobody. And when we continue to treat our elected officials with a level of celebrity, right? You work for us. Why are we celebrating your celebrity? Did you do your job? Because if you didn't do your job, what? We have to be clear that elected officials are there to serve us. And it's great if they're good with words, it's great, but are they good at legislation? Are they good at distributing those resources? Because the reality is right now, we as Black people need to free ourselves from this 345-year trap of not understanding how this system is supposed to work. We got to fill in those gaps. And part of filling in those gaps also means giving ourselves permission to say, we love you, friend. We've grown up with you. We went to the same school with you. And we thought you might be able to do this job a little better than you did, but you suck at it. And it ain't personal, except for the fact that your lack of being good at this job has now harmed our community, and we have other holes that we have to fill. But we're going to fill that, just not with you in this space. And the sooner we give ourselves permission to have that conversation, I think the better off we are going to be, the more sophistically engaged we will be able to be, and we'll be able to move beyond a paradigm that says Black civic engagement centers on registering to vote and getting out the vote, and actually consider the work of building the level of political expertise and political strategy and the political will to do what's necessary to get people into those offices who are going to distribute resources in ways that center us. We have to go to commercial break. YouTube, I think I'm going to turn this off now because I don't know how to do it properly, but I'm going to turn it off because I'm doing this on my phone. I love y'all, YouTube. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. All right, Urban View.